Good morning, everybody. Tara here with the Wifey Wake Up podcast at wifeyschool.us. This morning, so my husband and I just celebrated our 24th wedding anniversary this last weekend. And of course, it's a wonderful time to reminisce. And so I'm going to share one of those stories with you. So, why my $100 engagement ring was the best gift ever: love, loyalty, and life lessons. And, at the time, I didn't think $100 engagement ring. Here it is, by the way. At the time, I didn't think it was that amazing. So backing up a little bit, I was 18 years old when we got engaged. So for being an 18-year-old, I was pretty wise comparatively in a lot of areas. And as much as you could say that for an 18-year-old, but there are certainly a lot of areas where I had a lot of learning to do. I was still very naive. And one of those, of course, was relationships. And I was very fortunate in a number of ways, which I share a lot in this podcast. And so at 18, I was like, I met my soon-to-be husband. I was engaged at a young age, and I wasn't one of those girls that just dreamed of my wedding and the ring and all that. I actually dreamed of being married, and I think in hindsight that was very helpful as well. So I dreamt of the life together. A little bit more of the story. The proposal was rather informal. And I know some people say like the proposal is everything, that gives you a signal of what is to be. And I think there's truth in that. And I think there's also reading too much into it. Like most things in life, I try to kind of weigh things out. And so it was not necessarily a proposal like, Tara, will you marry me? It was, if I asked you to marry me, what would you say? And I realized, and he actually shared in later on, that was a way as a guy, because proposing to a woman can be extremely intimidating. So ladies, if it seems like he's really holding off, that also may be one of the reasons, is that he's just actually afraid of being turned down. And so in hindsight, I learned, I didn't think it was that big of a deal when he said it that way. It was kind of like, well, that's a little lackluster. But unfortunately, I hadn't had enough imaginations going on of how it would ideally be to be too let down. So I was like, yes, I would say yes. And so then we were engaged. So along with the not having envisioned my wedding or the ring, I'd never really been in a jewelry store looking at engagement rings. I'd only seen what other women were wearing, and that was kind of my idea. And so that kind of set the standard in a way. And I didn't even really know how much they cost. Of course, the bigger the diamond, typically the more it cost. And so my reference is when I met my husband's family, I thought that they were quite well-to-do comparatively. His parents lived out in the country, similar to my parents, on a modest, a nice size, not huge piece of country property. But the difference was that they were business owners and drove rather new vehicles. They would take out the whole family to Red Lobster or like Olive Garden or something. That's 6 adults and a kid. And to me, that was like, wow, to be able to do that, that's pretty darn amazing. It still is, right? If you can take out 6 adults at least, to a decent restaurant, that's a big deal still these days. And so that was my reference. And so I knew, even though when my now husband then proposed, it wasn't, this elaborate proposal, I knew still that there was a ring coming, and I was pretty excited for that, right? That's, as ladies, that is still, I think, for the most part, really something that we look forward to, which I'll get into in a little bit later. And so when he came home, I had these kind of expectations just built upon what I saw. His mom had nice jewelry. My future sister-in-law had a really nice ring. And I was like, okay, that's maybe a fair reference. So he came home from work one day and he worked with his father and in a nearby town where they lived. And so I knew he was going to the local jewelry shop, I think with his mom too, to pick out something. And so I was rather excited, of course. And when he came home and presented what he had found to me, I was not too excited. And I think that's the thing with anything in life. When we're disappointed, is because we have something built up in our minds, reasonable or not, and it just doesn't meet that expectation. And especially if it's not communicated, that's a real problem. But so what he presented was this ring. It's this is gold, but not like filled in. Is I don't it more is cast, but not solid gold in that sense, and a probably semi-precious stone. This looks like it might be a moonstone. And I later learned it was about $100 ring, which granted back in the year 2000, $100 went a lot further than it does these days, but still. But I decided at that time that, it might not be what I had expected or hoped for, but that I genuinely still wore it proudly because I was proud and happy to be and become his wife. And that I still knew in deep inside of me that it was the symbolism as well that was the significance of the ring about, the circle being symbolizing forever or eternity. And that to me, that's what it was about. And so I really strived to kind of fix my attitude about that. Well, fast forward years later, and I had some other thoughts about it. So since I've gotten several other rings, semi-precious, precious, but most of all, and I'm kind of skipping to the end here, I'm trying to keep it brief, is I've learned in the years since that these other gifts that I've received, I think as wives, as future wives, we expect that bridal ring, that engagement ring in particular, is going to be the most amazing, elaborate ring and gift that we maybe ever receive. And I think these are just hypotheses. This is just something, being a woman, just kind of thinking about this. I think there are a couple reasons. I think there's literally probably memories, thoughts in our lineage as women. Apparently, wedding rings go back up to 3,000 years ago, but they weren't originally precious gold or metals, originally just made out of grass or reeds, more about the symbolism. But fairly soon, I'm sure, into when people were actually crafting things out of metal, they had more symbolism. And look it up online if you're interested. It's pretty interesting, from literally puzzles of rings that go together, so that if the woman takes it off, it shows that she was being unfaithful, because it was hard to put back together, to actually having certain designs on them and stuff. And it hasn't been until fairly recently, I guess the Middle Ages is what I read, that they would actually add jewels to them. And I think that there's something to that. And I'd like to go deeper into it at some point, but I think I read, and I think it also relates back to the dowry. And that, however, most dowries came actually through the woman, through her father. And so, but there were times, and this is going to turn some women on their ear here, but think about this. There also were some cultures that would actually auction off their young women, the maidens, and the dowry was actually part of more so what the man purchased the woman for. And so I think in a way part of that carries through our lineage and subconsciously, and I think we attach it to our sense of value, how much we are valued, so therefore he's paid more. And also, in a similar sense, that is a representation of what he is willing to invest in you. It is similar to like a large down payment on a home, the minimum down payment on a home, or earnest money that you don't get back, because it's like, no, this is how much I'm willing to move forward and commit myself to this endeavor. And so again, these are just hypotheses. As I've looked back on my own thoughts and feelings about this, I think it is in us somewhere, somehow, about that, because women, hopefully this is an aha moment, just something to reflect upon. Guys, you're probably going to have light bulbs going off here, and maybe even, going off and shorting out. But as I think about it also, the women who are just like, all about the ring and like showing it to their girlfriends and stuff. In a way, I think it's kind of like, look at the catch that I got. And I know, guys, it's not like a picture of you and him or you and her, right? She's not showing a picture of you, but it's a symbol of, look at how much of a catch I got that he was willing to invest this in me and in us. Now, granted, absolutely, I know this is all very materialistic as well. And certainly the jewelry industry has capitalized on that. And there are gorgeous rings out there. But I just want to kind of point out all this stuff that we may not be aware of, that certainly in the years as I pined for a big, gorgeous ring, really contemplated, what does that really mean? And soon after, or in that process, I learned about conflict diamonds and really how much diamonds are marked up. And so that became less the focus. And since then, I've received several really precious rings, precious in the sentiment, not so much in the stone. And I hope all of you get to that point as well, whether that is actually your wedding ring or something that you receive later. Heirlooms certainly have been very precious. Another ring I received when we were on vacation, and this is what I really always wanted. In hindsight, I realized is that I wanted something that was very specially chosen by him, my husband, and was not typical. And, so, and I did receive that actually on a trip to the Black Hills several years ago. And he spotted, actually, it was 2 rings. They go together really beautifully. And so I love how the handful, interesting, huh? I've received since, and they have not been big opulent rings, but they have special memories that certainly that one we got in the Black Hills helps to encapsulate that time and that wonderful time we had together. And certainly heirlooms and special gifts. There's a story behind each one of them, including my original engagement ring, which I'm sharing with you. And again, we just celebrated our 24th wedding anniversary. And so, like everything here at Wifey School, this is all based on things that I've learned in 24 years of successful marriage. Success being, we've been through the ups and downs, the difficult times, the glorious times, and we are better because of it. And I want to share those things with you so that you can get through the hurdles, the difficult times in life with a lot more ease and get on to not just the happy times, but really be able to cherish life more and more together. So I think, and one more thing that I wanted to share. Another thing that I learned years later is, I don't know if this was so much on my husband's mind, particularly when he first bought this first ring, or if he realized it afterwards, like, oh, wow, that was actually a good strategy that wasn't necessarily something that he thought of from the beginning. But he said that, you've earned every ring that you've received since. And that can, it can kind of rub you wrong as a wife, like, okay, how am I working for that, right? But at the same time, I'm very Saturnian in that sense. Like I understand, the work that goes in, what you can get out of life. And so that very logical part of me is like, well, yeah, that makes sense. But it also adds to, what I've received since, having so much more intrinsic value to it, not just the material value. And I think I've been able to appreciate those gifts ever since. And so I hope that for both men and women, this gets you to think, gets you to think about it a little bit, because it certainly has in my life. And I'm really appreciative that I've been able to come to this point and see it from this point of view. Yeah. So I would love to hear from you as usual. Please comment in the comment section, and men and women. I'm very curious to hear from you. And of course, share with a friend that you think would appreciate this, someone that comes to mind. And if you're wondering, gosh, how do I get to the next point in our marriage? I'm really struggling at this point. And I want to resolve things, but it seems so difficult. I don't know where to go next. I'd be happy to help you out. My contact information, you can connect with me in the description notes. And if you're just appreciating the content, we love it. Appreciate a tip from you. There's a tip jar there. Would love to take my best buddy, that's my husband, out to coffee or lunch or dinner, and it's all appreciated. Your thumbs up and sharing this with friends is absolutely appreciated as well. So have a wonderful day, everybody. Take care, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.